Dorian Gray, the ultimate anti-hero? By this definition, I would say yes. He is the narrative protagonist of the picture of Dorian Gray and is driven by his desire for perfect vanity and social status to obsession and murder, the novel concluding with his lonely, accidental suicide. Another ultimate anti-hero, in my opinion, is Nina Sawyers from Darren Aronofsky's 2010 film Black Swan. Nina has a similar arc as she is driven by her determination to be the perfect ballerina, to obsession and murder, the novel concluding with her lonely, accidental suicide. Now, there are distinctions between Dorian and Nina, despite their shared murderous tendencies and obsessive behaviours. Dorian is your classic Byronic hero, whilst Nina is a tragic hero, both anti-heroes. The Byronic hero is arrogant, ruthless, manipulative, sexually appealing, emotionally/intellectually tortured, and self-destructive. This handsome and frankly mysterious man that consumes Basil Hallward and ends up murdering him fixed the checklist of such a self-obsessed archetype. The tragic hero, however, has a distinct hamartia that leads to a peripeteia and then an anagoras from a seemingly normal or positively characterized protagonist. Nina begins as a naive ballerina and ends up as an obsessive, self-destructive murderer plagued by psychosis and sexual frustration. These two contrasting depictions of the anti-hero archetype are mainly due to the differing context of the time. The Victorian era was criticised for its inappropriate scandals of Lord Byron, and so the Byronic hero is born to represent the normalisation of sexuality and to display the consequences of falling to a life centred on the material and aesthetic. The 2010s was criticised for the popularisation of female sexuality, and thus the tragic hero was taken and modernised from Greek tragedies in Gothic literature, like the picture of Dorian Gray, one that shifts to fulfil this cultural expectation, but ultimately suffers because of her desire for perfection. But what makes Dorian so timeless? He is a manifestation of the flaws at the heart of society. Oscar Wilde, his creator, examines the consequences of substituting an aesthetic for an ethical conscience. Wilde was in the heat of the aestheticism movement, which denounced the sober morality and middle-class values that characterized the Victorian age, and embraced beauty as the chief pursuit of art. He wants to highlight through Dorian that this movement mirrors his own deterioration, and thus we will follow a similar demise destined for self-destruction. Wilde wields Dorian not just as a character for entertainment, but to expose the vanity and egocentrism that were at the heart of not only his society, but our current one too. Dorian is described as wonderfully handsome with his finely carved scarlet lips, his frank blue eyes, crisp gold hair. This positive characterization initially presents him as a perfect and untouched character, just as Nina is, but that'll come later. However, as he grew more and more enamored by his own beauty and more interested in the corruption of his soul, it becomes clear that he is tainted by sin and moral deterioration. The irony of this theme of deterioration, though, is only emphasized by his mocking of the misshapen body and failing limbs of his painting. Dorian was more focused on how his sins are betrayed than how he can truly resolve his soul. He even goes on to stab the painting and in turn himself because of its vulgar ugliness. No matter how much Dorian attempts to reverse the consequences of his pursuit for the perfect appearance and oppress this vanity and egocentrism, it only consumes him and persists regardless. But Dorian is not just Dorian, he is all of us. Just as Aristotle dictates in Mimesis, art imitates life, the picture of Dorian Gray imitates the collective societal experience of longing for an unattainable perfection in our appearance. In the modern era, the egocentrism and narcissism of social media has caused an obsession with physical appearances, brainwashing us all into the vanity that Dorian suffers from. Black Swan borrows some of the picture of Dorian Gray's theme, and has a much more explicit discussion of perfection. Nina concludes the film bleeding out on a mattress, not even worried about dying, and just whispers, "I felt it. I was perfect." The film also adopts the Gothic expressionist aesthetic of the picture of Dorian Gray, making it effective at conveying similar themes. Not only does this film entail a specific aesthetic that conveys control, innocence, yet darkness and chaos, it tells the story of repression and the duality of self. As she wrestles with her intense desire for perfection through passion, she is also fighting the physical symbol of this passion through the darker, sexual and honest character Lily, who acts as a juxtaposition to Nina's controlled, childish characterization. Lily has passion, a depiction of raunch culture of 2000s pop culture. Black Swan acts as a criticism towards those that attempt to fulfill these cultural expectations, with the original Nina being held up as a prize to be fetishized and evaluated, whereas her developed character suffers death and psychosis almost as a punishment for fulfilling her gendered role in this bubblegum misogynistic culture. Such a culture can still be seen today, making such a criticism relevant 14 years since the film was released. In a culture of OnlyFans and other adult behaviors becoming easily accessible and even popularized, many young women feel pressure to conform to such a lifestyle, yet are still criticized for caving in, despite this agenda being pushed by men that are the first to drag them down. It is clear that Nina would fall prey to the passion-driven, depraved underbelly of social media in today's age. Therefore, it is clear that the anti-hero archetype has been used significantly in literature to reveal the flaws that plague the human condition at the very core of our cultures, the desire for an unattainable perfect, and to represent the inevitable self-destruction of such a longing, no matter how much one attempts to control the beast within. The picture of Dorian Gray has inspired many texts, including Black Swan, to continue a message about the dangers of perfection, and whilst they may represent different perfects, they still represent depravity, passion, and obsession as negative qualities that plague culture in the Victorian era, in the 2000s, and today. I don't want to be at the mercy of my emotions. I want to use them, to enjoy them, and to dominate them. How ridiculous Dorian is for saying this, Wild laughs. I felt it. I was perfect. Nina mutters as she dies. And how silly she is, and Aronofsky chuckles. How ridiculous and silly we all are for thinking we can be perfect without consequences. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you learned something new, and don't forget to like and subscribe down below.